remember that fantasy that has been circulating, and by has been circulating, I mean plagued solo businesses for years? I'm talking about stop trading time for money, escape services, click here to learn how to build passive income. I mean, it's the dream, right? You spend a few hours recording a course, then escape to a remote beach and watch your Stripe notifications come in while you're sipping Mai Tai. While this approach looks great on Instagram, it collapses under basic math and upon contact with reality. The State of Solopreneurship report showed that the solopreneurs with the most stable income aren't the ones who escaped services, but the ones who architected them properly and layered leverage on top. By the way, you can download the full State of Solopreneurship report and learn how much solopreneurs make, how they make their money, and how long it takes them to get to $100,000 a year. All real data with zero bias. Download the full report below. Now, Kids Creator Economy report echoes this finding. Services are more lucrative than digital products. However, stats without context can be very misleading. Common wisdom tells you to start with services, then upgrade to digital products and scale endlessly. Let's look at it strategically, though, because personally, I'm fed up with the dehumanized ascension funnels. Hi, I'm Adriana Tika. I'm a strategy advisor to solopreneurs. I work with coaches, consultants, and experts to help them build a solid, profitable business without having to sell their souls to social media algorithms. If you want no BS advice on what it really takes to grow a solo business, hit the subscribe button below so you get notified every time I release a new video. Now let's talk about services as part of a solopreneur's offer. I encourage you to think of services as a research lab instead of a stepping stone. Early stage solopreneurs often treat services as a temporary inconvenience, something that they should endure until the scalable product saves them. Strategically, that's backwards. Services are, in fact, your highest signal feedback loop because they reveal a few very interesting things that digital products cannot reveal. The exact objections buyers have, the language they use to describe outcome, the real bottlenecks in execution, the parts of your framework that actually move revenue. And that signal is more valuable than passive skill because courses, which are the thing passive value advisors tell you to do, for courses, conversion rates vary wildly, often between 0.1 and 10%, depending on your list quality and worth. However, what consistently improves that number is grounding the course in real objections, real language, and real execution friction, all of which are revealed in services. However big or small your audiences, this kind of increasing conversion rate is hard to ignore. This is why I'm saying that services are a necessary step to building great digital products. But that doesn't mean that you should teach them once your first course or PDF takes off. And I've seen how services can do magic for a business firsthand. All of my courses and info products are rooted in strategy sessions. I spend a lot of time looking for patterns in those one-on-one sessions with my client to see what they ask me and what their real challenges are. Everything I've built started with a service first or an insight from a service, and they've all performed way above average relative to the size of my audience, of course. Speaking of audiences, did you know that the size of your audience changes the risk tolerance, not just the revenue potential? We tend to talk about audience sizes as a threshold for launches. If you have under 2,000 engaged people, you should build high-ticket services. If you have between 2,000 and 10,000 audience members, you can start experimenting with products. If you have over 10,000 email subscribers, for instance, the scalable layers begin to have predictability. So you should mostly focus on digital products. Now, this kind of framing is theoretically correct, but also very much incomplete because the audience size also changes how much experimentation you can afford. Think about it this way. A 1% conversion difference on a 1,500 person list barely registers, while on a 50,000 person list, it can swing six figures. Larger audiences tolerate more product testing because distribution cushions mistakes. Smaller audiences require precision because every launch consumes relational capital. Here's an example. Substack reports that strong writers convert between 5 and 10% of free subscribers into paid readers. At 1,000 subscribers, that's 50 to 100 paid readers. At 20,000 subscribers, that's 1,000 to 2,000 paying customers. So you have the same conversion rate, but an entirely different margin for error. Now, I get a lot of pushback when I say that the size of your audience matters, whatever you sell. But the simple math above proves that. So even if you don't want to sell digital products, consider this. You will exhaust your audience at some point. This is the part that most founders and solopreneurs ignore. We all have a number in mind, an audience size that feels comfortable. Maybe it's 10,000 email subscribers, a million followers on social media. However, larger audiences, you will eventually reach saturation for a given offer. This is a very important reframe that I want you to consider. Saturation is not a failure of marketing, but a function of finite attention and finite willingness to buy. Every market has a carrying capacity at any given moment. No matter how good your marketing is, it will eventually feel like pouring water into a sieve. Think about it this way. If you have 2,000 engaged people and 3% buy your program, that's 60 buyers. Those 60 buyers cannot buy the same program again at full price next quarter. If you have 10,000 engaged subscribers and 5% convert to paid newsletter tiers, you have tapped a meaningful portion of the willing segment. This is where growth plateaus unless distribution expands. At some point, everyone in your current audience either bought from you or firmly decided that they would never do that, which means that you have two options that are not mutually exclusive, but rather work well together. Option number one, constantly invest in audience growth. And I do mean constantly. I know most of us do it sporadically when a launch bombs or when we feel like we have a couple days to dedicate. If I learned something more than a decade ago when I was a freelancer, it's ABM. Always be prospecting. Do it when you don't need it. Don't wait for the pipeline to dry up. You will end up in the feast and famine cycle. I always teach my clients that audience growth is a structural responsibility, not a marketing hobby. The second option is designing multiple products for the same person. Most entrepreneurs build one flagship offer and treat it like a bloody monument. They sell one thing alone because it's proven. And yes, that makes sense in the beginning. But depending on the industry you're in, the competition, and the ICP that you serve, it might be easier to expand your offer stack than to attract new buyers month after month. Each of the people in your audience has multiple needs. None of them are unidimensional beings. They might need skill acquisition, implementation support, strategic recalibration, peer accountability, advanced mastery. If you only solve one layer of their evolution, your revenue will cap very early. Over time, your audience will also fix you in place. They see you as the LinkedIn person or the email person or the strategy person. Unless you deliberately expand the problem set that you solve, you could hit an identity ceiling as much as a revenue one. This is why I say that a hybrid revenue architecture serves different stages of the same buyer journey. If possible, look beyond the single platform or a single challenge that you solve. For example, I've helped my clients with LinkedIn strategy, thread strategy, email marketing, newsletters, offer architecture, overall strategy, pricing, and more. This does not mean building 10 disconnected products, but solving adjacent problems for the same person. Retention doesn't need to follow an agency model alone. You can and should look at what other struggles your clients have because compounding happens when lifetime value expands. As a business owner, one of the hardest things to do is to anticipate saturation and design workarounds around that constraint ahead of time. This is why I advise you to design your next move with structural awareness. Instead of asking, what should I build next? Try this. What stage is my audience size actually at? What percentage of them have already bought my primary offer? Have I saturated the obvious segment? What adjacent need does my current buyer have that I am not addressing? And lastly, how am I structurally investing in audience growth this quarter? Then ask a harder question. Is my next move expanding distribution, expanding depth, or expanding adjacency? Write down your answers, then look at your current offers. If you have under 2,000 engaged people in your audience and you're building low ticket scale plays, consider whether high ticket depth would actually accelerate your trajectory. If you have over 10,000 engaged people and are still fully dependent on one-on-one services, consider where productization would increase leverage. If your launches feel weaker each cycle, examine whether audience growth or product adjacency is the bottleneck. Because it's usually one of those two. It's not copywriting, it's not the product itself, it's not your social media content. Sure, all of these help, but not enough to mitigate a structural risk. So, what about you? What's your main focus this quarter? Are you focusing on audience growth or are you architecting new offers for your existing audience? Let me know in the comments below.